This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Northern Kenya leaders meet after an attack on passenger bus. At least 17 killed in 2 attacks by suspected ADF militia in DR Congo. And rescue efforts underway at apartment collapse in Kenya. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In Business World, Bank report predicts Nigeria's economic recession. And in sports, Rosenberger crowned East Africa Safari Classic champion as Kenya's Onkarai takes 3rd place. Well, let's begin here in Kenya, where leaders from the north have been meeting following an attack on a passenger bus on Friday, which left at least 8 people dead. The meeting comes amid a security operation in pursuit of the attackers. Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility. Most of the victims are police officers who were travelling back to their respective stations. Militants stopped the bus that was travelling to the volatile Mandera County on the border with Somalia. They then separated 11 non-Somalis from the rest of the passengers before opening fire. 3 managed to escape. The latest incident has jolted security agents who, since 2015, had managed to reduce threats by Al-Shabaab. Well, joining me in the studio is Andrew Franklin. Andrew Franklin is a regional security analyst and joining me now. Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the responsibility for this attack. Al-Shabaab has admitted responsibility, 8 people dead. What is the group trying to achieve, would you say?
Well, Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. It has been launching a series of attacks since 2011, in any case throughout the 5 frontier counties in close proximity to the Somalia border. That is, since the Kenyans invaded Somalia in October of 2011. The attacks now follow a pattern in December where there's a lot of people traveling to and from their duty stations in the counties of northeast Kenya. This bus was not attacked in Mandera County, which is indeed volatile and subject to many Al-Shabaab attacks, especially on Safaricom masts, security force vehicles and the like, but it was in another county along the border. Al-Shabaab has been steadily ramping up its activities in the last 4 or 5 years to essentially isolate the people of northeast Kenya in the 5 counties from the rest of the country. Many of the civil servants and people who have been targeted in the last 4 or 5 years have in fact been Christians. Whether you're talking about students at Garissa University, security force personnel supposedly ostensibly on patrol, and also civil servants, teachers, non-local Christian teachers who have been killed.
You said earlier that this has happened since Kenyans invaded, those were your words, Somalia. Tell us a bit more about that and why are attacks happening now?
Well, the attacks started about 2 weeks after the Operation Linda and She was launched on October 15th, 2011. Prior to that, we had had very few attacks, not in Nairobi, but elsewhere in northeast Kenya. And Al-Shabaab has developed its own homegrown franchise in this country where they recruit from disaffected youth and marginalized youth, not merely from within the Somali counties, if you will, but elsewhere in the country, hence the attackers at the Dusit 2 hotel. Al-Shabaab is punishing Kenya for its invasion. It's also Kenya's continued presence within Amisom across the border in Jubaland is obviously a lightning rod for Al-Shabaab activities and insurgency. But the terror attacks started in Mombasa, Nairobi, and in buses in and around Nairobi within 2 or 3 weeks of the invasion of Somalia.
Let's talk a bit about the authorities here in Kenya. They have managed to reduce the number of attacks in northeast Kenya. What do you think has changed now?
Well, the reduction of attacks is what you're talking about is mainly on civilian vehicles, civilian buses and the like, not on security force patrols. Those attacks have continued unabated. In the past, these counties have been under curfew. That is, you're not supposed to move from 6 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning. There have also been a somewhat sporadic introduction of police escort vehicles in high security threat areas that may have reduced the attacks. What's notable about this particular attack, of course, is there was no explosion. There was no IED attack on the bus because Al-Shabaab wanted to be able to make a statement to kill Christians, to kill the non-local passengers on the bus, which then leads to increased suspicion on the part of so-called Kenyans, outsiders, and the security forces about the local population.
So this was a planned attack.
Absolutely.
What do you think security agents need to do?
Well, the response of the security agencies needs to be ramped up, but more importantly, a lot more aggressive patrolling by the administration police, who are notionally should be in charge of countering the insurgency in that area, but aggressive patrolling by properly equipped, properly trained administration police with the General Service Unit as well, with air support. You see, the attack that came at 5:30 p.m. on this bus was timed to as the sun is going down. The security forces were not going to drive to the scene of that attack in the dark, because they would then be subject to the inevitable attacks by Al-Shabaab, who will be waiting for them.
Let's talk about what other bodies can do to help stop this sort of thing happening. What do you think they can do, other regional and continental bodies?
Well, the regional bodies are in fact impotent in this case. This is a Kenyan domestic problem. This is an insurgency, which, yes, it has been fueled from across the border in Somalia. Yes, it was exacerbated by the Kenyan incursion into Somalia in October of 2011, which Kenya had the right to do, by the way, a punitive expedition, but it wasn't supposed to be an 8-year commitment. The regional bodies need to perhaps look into the financing of terrorist activities, the cross-border trade between Somalia and Kenya in such items as charcoal, sugar, smuggled goods and the like. Human trafficking has grown, as is narcotics trafficking. So I think that is a transnational problem of organized crime that Al-Shabaab benefits from. Al-Shabaab is taxing a lot of this illicit trade to finance its insurgency, not only in Somalia, but also now in Kenya.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. We've got to move on now. That was Mr. Andrew Franklin, Regional Security Analyst here in Kenya. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us. Thank you. Let's now move on to another story that happened here in Kenya. This is about the death toll from the building collapse in Nairobi. It has now risen to 4 people. Other sources report this number at 3, and local media reports that around a dozen others have been rescued from the debris. The 6-story building contained 57 flats, and authorities are yet to establish how many people remain unaccounted for. The rescue operation is being led by the military. Authorities have warned that the death toll is likely to rise.
Lucky to be alive. Almost 5 hours after a 6-story apartment block on the outskirts of Nairobi collapsed, this man was pulled out of the debris by rescuers and rushed to hospital. Others were not so lucky. At least 2 bodies were recovered and taken to a nearby morgue.
The total number of people rescued so far is 8 who have been taken to hospital. And the 2, as at 1:30, have been confirmed dead.
But that figure, authorities cautioned, was likely to rise as rescue efforts continued into the evening. Amidst the confusion, authorities were still trying to establish the number of people missing. Where they can, authorities are using heavy equipment to lift the rubble. But at the epicenter, it's a slow, painstaking process using hands and shovels. The hope is those still unaccounted for will be found alive. A neighbor, Onesmus Maingi, says he was going to the shops at about 8 a.m., a time when most people would have been starting their day when the building came down.
I was going to buy milk when I heard a bang. On looking, I saw the first floor collapsing. I ran for help, and that's when the rest of the building came down.
It is still not clear what caused the building to collapse. But the country's infrastructure has been devastated by heavy rainfall and floods, which have claimed over 100 lives in the past 3 weeks. Rescue officials say the 6-storied building had 57 floods. In March last year, a government audit on buildings earmarked 200 buildings in Nairobi alone for demolition, terming them unsafe for human occupation, while a further 688 structures, mostly in low-income areas, warranted inspection. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, Robert can now join us on the line. Robert, rescue operations are ongoing at this site where the 6-story building collapsed. What more can you tell us?
Well, Karen, the good news is that at least 33 people have now been rescued from the building that came down on Friday morning in a suburb here in Nairobi and have been taken to various hospitals across the city. The bad news is that the death toll has now risen to 5. That's after another body was recovered late last night by rescue officials on the ground. Now, we are made to understand that at least 26 people are still unaccounted for, so rescue operations are still ongoing. Now, what they're doing today is they're now going floor by floor. They've managed to, this was a 6-story building. Now, early this morning, they managed to completely remove the top floor, and they're now going through the 5th floor. Then from there, they'll go to the next floor until they're satisfied that all the bodies have been recovered and anyone still alive has been rescued from the rubble. Karen?
Robert, building collapses, as we know, are common here in Nairobi. This is because obviously housing is high, the demand for housing is high, and of course unscrupulous developers often bypass regulations. How do you think this can be avoided?
Well, Karen, it's not just unscrupulous developers that are part of the problem. The system is also part of the problem. Corruption has played a huge part in a lot of these buildings collapsing over the last couple of years. And we've covered quite a few of them. And each time it's the same case with authorities coming up and saying, look, we're going to take this a lot more seriously. There was a report that came out last year in 2018, which said that at least 200 buildings which were occupied as residency occupancy needed to be brought down because they were simply not safe for human occupation. Not all of those buildings have come down. Another 688 structures were supposed to be inspected. Whether that audit was completed, we're not sure. But the biggest problem here...
Yes, okay. It looks like we have lost Robert Nagila there, talking to us on the line there about the building collapse that happened in Nairobi with and the ongoing rescue operation. Let's move on to other news now. In the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 17 people have been killed in 2 separate attacks by suspected members of the Allied Democratic Forces. The raids were conducted in Mantumbi and Koloko villages in Beni. It is yet another surge in violence by the Ugandan group, whose operations continue to hamper efforts to contain the spread of Ebola in the region. Since October, the ADF has been staging near-daily attacks in Beni. This has strained relations between the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC and the local population. Locals accuse UNMISS of not protecting them against the ADF. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... And
each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Now to Algeria, where 42 weeks of protests have been calling for an end to power held by the ruling elite. However, just a few days to the December 12th election, candidates engaged in a televised debate. Well, we are now joined by CGTN's Adel El Marhouhi, who is in Cairo for us. Adel, after the live debate by the presidential candidates, do you think Algerians still believe that the election is meaningless, and if so, why?
Well, this is the first time Algerians would ever see sort of a debate, a presidential debate. 5 candidates going head-to-head for 3 hours on live television and taking questions about the future of the country. So some have been actually quite convinced about the process that may be lying ahead. It's a new experience to them and maybe change is coming. However, for the Hirak movement, one of the main opposition and the callers for the protests there, they believe that this entire political process is a political theater staged by the old regime. They see 5 candidates. 2 of them were former prime minister for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The other 2 were ministers in the cabinets for the former president. And the third is a politician who rose as a head of a political party because of his support to the previous regime. And that's mainly the main derivative force that is affecting the protesters, affecting those who have been trying to reach change for nearly 9 months now. They believe that one of the ways to move forward is actually to boycott the vote. So the matter of turnout in general is very crucial to the upcoming election, but it doesn't mean that there's a coherence or a unanimous sense among people or among some supporters of the former regime to participate in that election.
And Adel, the protesters have been demonstrating to demand that the ruling elite that has controlled Algeria since independence in 1962 leaves power. How possible do you think that is?
Well, it seems that when you take a look at the general political status, the military is paving the road to these elections. It has given the approval to start with presidential elections and then follow that with constitutional amendments, which is exactly the opposite of what the protesters have been calling for. The military establishment has been the leading power within the Algerian government, as you said, since 1962, and still has been, or at least this is what appears to many of those in the opposition lines. And therefore, taking that into consideration and putting on top of which that the 5 candidates were quite prominent figures in President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's 4 terms of presidency, it seems that this is what the situation is, and it is moving in a way from the perspective of the protesters that if it completes in the same way, it means that the continuation of the military overrule and power and involvement in politics will last. And here comes the opposition part and the rejection for the voting that it will be held on December 12th. On the other hand, we have the supporters who see that it is better to take a step towards stability and avoid chaos or randomness in the political system. And they, from that perspective, support holding the elections and therefore paving the road to gradual transition, which they believe will definitely be a change, whatever that the new leader will be.
And returning to the debate, how did Algerians react to that?
It is the first of its time, as I said earlier, and many have been quite affected positively to see sort of a democratic change or a selective pool to choose from a leader for the country, which has not been the case for decades in Algeria. And to them, this is a great change in itself. Others believe it's a political theater that should not be taken seriously and is a continuation to the former regime spreading its influence once again and trying to move around in a counter movement to the protests that have been calling for change and standing against President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who has been sick for several years. And the debate therefore goes on. The country is divided within to how they're perceiving this, whether it's the election or the debate that was held for the very first time in the country.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was CGTN's Adel El Mahrouhi there in Cairo talking to us about the Algerian elections taking place. Let's move on to other news now, to Tanzania, where Chinese and World Health Organization experts have launched a program which aims to curb the spread of schistosomiasis. The waterborne disease is prevalent in most sub-Saharan African countries due to the lack of clean water supplies.
Schistosomiasis, which is also called blood flux, spreads in places that lack a clean water supply. Like bilharzia, snails are the main carriers. Chinese and World Health Organization experts were in Zanzibar's Pemba area to launch a new health program in combating the spread of this disease. China, which has a long history of controlling this waterborne disease, has been here to lend a helping hand through distribution of drugs and a cleanup of local water points. The locals have learnt a lot.
Involve the other sectors like water, agriculture and environment also to see how best we can work together as one health center to make sure that we combat the prevalence of the schistosomiasis or kichocho in Kiswahili, which is very common in our area.
Chinese experts have been here for a while now. Before their arrival, infection rates stood at 50%. Now the numbers have reduced to around 8%.
That shows that this project is very, very successful as a pilot project. And now we intend ourselves, WHO and Chinese Republic of China, or government of China, the peoples of China, to extend this program to other areas of Zanzibar, that is Pemba and Unguja.
Through this support, the local government of Zanzibar has also launched its own schistosomiasis program. This is expected to push infection rates lower to around 0.64%. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
The new head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is set to visit Ethiopia this weekend. It'll be part of her first trip to Africa since assuming the EU presidency. During her stay in Addis Ababa, von der Leyen is expected to meet President Sahle-Work Zewde and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. She will also meet Musa Faki Mahamat, chairman of the African Union Commission, to explore further cooperation with the continental body. Well, CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi now joins us for more on that story. Coletta, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will be in Ethiopia on Saturday, today, in her first visit outside the EU since taking up the role. What more can you tell us about this visit?
Well, Karen, the President of the EU has already met the African Union Commission Chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat, very early in the morning today. And part of the issues they discussed is she highlighted that as part of her tenure, her three main priorities are issues on geopolitical issues of the digital era, as well as fighting global warming and the climate change. So she said that those are the key things that she hopes that the European Union will be able to collaborate with Africa, because all these, I mean, the two unions face the same issues, but they also discussed issues of peace and security, and migration was also another issue that they tackled. But moving forward, as we're speaking right now, she and her delegation, they're meeting the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Mr. Abiy Ahmed, and we expect they'll be discussing issues about elections. Elections are coming up in the country in the year 2020 in this country. They'll also, the EU will also be putting its weight behind the health issues in Ethiopia, as well as offering to assist Ethiopia more in terms of job creation. And much later, she'll be meeting the president of Ethiopia later to discuss more on these issues.
And Coletta, von der Leyen's visit has been described as a political statement. Why a political statement, and what's on the agenda?
Well, basically just a strong reassurance from the European Union that it still works side by side with the African Union on key considerations and key declarations that the two unions discussed in 2017 in Abidjan when they had the AU-EU summit to discuss underlying issues. And these are issues of governance, issues of peace and security, issues of migration, as well as health and other issues that the European Union feels that if it supports the African continent in different countries, then the AU will be able to be self-dependent on its own issues, but at the same time increase the mutual benefit between the two unions. So it's just a political statement because it's a clear declaration that the EU continues to work with the African Union on these issues.
And finally, Coletta, what do you expect to come out of her visit to Ethiopia?
Well, probably just a creation of confidence within the African Union that the European Union still has it in mind, and as the two unions are supposed to meet in 2020 in February, then they hope to continue projecting what was discussed, because the AU and the EU have said that this is just a continuation of the leadership in the two unions, because leadership changes but the unions will remain. So they have said that it's just a projection to ensure that they will continue the declarations they made when they meet in Brussels to discuss more in Brussels in 2020. But at the end of the day also, it's also a time for Africa to assert itself and tell Europe the things that it needs to be done in the way it needs to be done, and also to show Europe and the European Union that it can make its own decisions and will expect a mutual benefit in terms of relationship.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi there for us in Addis Ababa. Data from the Zambezi River Authority shows that the water flow at the Victoria Falls in southern Africa is at its lowest since 1995. This has sparked fears that climate change could be the cause of the reduction in water, and locals say that this latest development has affected the number of tourists visiting the area, affecting their businesses. Let's now take a look.
For decades, the Victoria Falls have drawn tourists from Zimbabwe and Zambia. This is where southern Africa's Zambezi River cascades down 100 meters. However, drought has affected the water flow, fueling fears that climate change is taking an adverse effect in the region.
I think it's just this year, because in the previous we used to have these falls a little bit. When it gets dry, it doesn't reach to that extent.
The turnout has been very low here at the Victoria Falls, because nowadays people are informed before they travel. They are properly informed about what is happening here at the Victoria Falls, and that also has contributed to the business not being as good as it used to be. So we just hope that this season we are going to have good rains, and then we are going to have a lot of people here at the Victoria Falls.
World leaders have gathered in Madrid for the COP25 to discuss ways of halting catastrophic warming caused by human-driven greenhouse gas emissions. And Southern Africa is already suffering some of its worst effects.
Some time back, I heard about climate change. I thought it was just a story people used to talk about, not until I came to see what is happening here at the Victoria Falls. The falls is completely dry. The dry season is normal for every season to be dry like that, but this season it started as early as June. So this is one of I would say it's the longest dry season we've ever had here at the Victoria Falls.
Zimbabwe and Zambia have suffered power cuts as they are heavily reliant on hydropower from plants at the Kariba Dam, which is on the Zambezi River upstream of the waterfalls. Yet some scientists are cautious about blaming climate change, as they say there are always seasonal variation in levels. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Back to here in Kenya, continuous rains have led to frequent disasters. More than 160,000 people, including nearly 18,000 who are displaced countrywide, have been affected by floods or landslides since the onset of the rains. Infrastructure, including roads and bridges, have been damaged, hampering effective humanitarian response efforts to affected areas. Food, medicine and other necessities are currently needed. And in response to this, local and overseas Chinese have donated items to help the residents in the disaster-hit regions. In late November, landslides and mudslides hit parts of West Pokot County, resulting in the death of at least 72 people. More than 10,000 others were displaced. That's according to the county authorities there.
I have been honored and privileged to stand here in the Chinese embassy in Kenya, having received the goodwill and the support from the people of China, whom he represents. We have just received a lot of donation for food, clothing, beddings and so on, so that we can resettle the people who are affected by the landslide and the floods.
In Beijing, Hong Kong's new police commissioner, Chris Tang Ping-keung, has been visiting the city. He was received by Zhang Xiaoming, director of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. He also attended a flag-raising ceremony at Tiananmen Square on Saturday morning. And on Friday, he met with China's Minister of Public Security, Zhao Kejie. This is Tang's first visit to the capital since taking office last month. Zhao pledged that his support to the Hong Kong police, telling Tang that ending violence and restoring order are top priorities. The commissioner said he's determined to defend the one country, two systems principle.
We will work together and devote ourselves to stopping violence and restoring social order. We'll help Hong Kong return to the prosperity and stability under the one country, two systems principle.
When there are too many peaceful demonstrations, the police can't deal with them. For example, there were 3 peaceful demonstrations on the same day, with some people trying to conduct crimes at the same time. But our police forces can't control the situation. Now is the right time to pass a law to restrict these demonstrations, not to restrict freedom of speech. But in the case I mentioned above, we need to carry out some work to coordinate. In addition, masked people are breaking the law now, so the police should enforce punishment in a timely manner. Finally, it is necessary to separate peaceful demonstrators from those who attempt to commit crimes. For example, the police can ask the crowd to disperse as soon as possible, and if they don't go, they will be counted as part of the mob group.
We've got all the business news coming up for you after the break, including World Bank report predicts Nigeria's economic recession. And fintech firm launches app to deliver groceries to consumers in Zimbabwe.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A new World Bank economic report predicts Nigeria may be heading towards another economic recession. This is due to the volatile global oil market and dwindling price of crude oil. And this is coming just 3 years after the country edged out of its worst economic meltdown in nearly 3 decades. CGTN's Kelechi Emekolum tells us how this would impact on the nation.
Worrying predictions coming from the World Bank. Nigeria may be on the brink of yet another recession as oil prices fluctuate between $63 and $55 per barrel. The World Bank, in its 2019 economic report, has said if crude oil prices plunge by as much as 25% to $50 per barrel, it would significantly reduce economic growth and lead to another recession. Just 3 years back, Nigeria was hit by its worst recession in nearly 3 decades, with about 50% of its 200 million population living below poverty line. Another recession would have a devastating impact on the country and its people.
Another recession will mean that poverty rate that is already high. That same report said Nigeria will house 25% of global poor people in no time. It will mean that more poverty. It will mean that a lot of things Nigeria wants in terms of GDP that Nigeria will not be able to do. It will mean more unemployment. It's not really going to spell out. We cannot put our heads around it. You saw what happened to Naira to global currencies, particularly Naira to dollar, which was as high as over 500. It's a major thing we need to guide against.
Crude oil is Nigeria's mainstay, accounting for about 90% of export earnings and over 60% of government revenue. Government has made diversification efforts from its oil-dependent economy, vying into sectors like agriculture, services and mining. Experts advise on major reforms to avoid another economic downturn.
What we need to do is reform. If we want to go on reform in manufacturing, we should go on reform on that. Power supply, it should be a major reform. If we're borrowing money, it should go directly into infrastructure. And one of the ways the world can see that we are serious about this, every single kobo generated from crude oil should be invested directly in infrastructure. Capital expenditure, not administrative capital expenditure.
Nigeria's growth has remained relatively slow since edging out of recession. The non-oil sector still lags behind, with 1.6% and 2.6% growth in the first and second quarter of 2019, respectively. Aside looking to other sectors, there have been cutbacks on government spendings and actions to increase its tax base, although not enough. Now authorities would be looking towards focusing on policies that would avert a looming recession. Kelechi Amekalam, CGT in Abuja, Nigeria.
Zimbabweans continue to struggle with a broken economy and massive inflation. Fintech company Hello Paisa was launched a few years ago to make money transfers easy and accessible. The company has now launched a new app to get groceries to Zimbabweans. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu has the details.
Militia.com is an app that gives Zimbabweans living in South Africa an opportunity to shop for their families. All they need to do is order and pay, and the goods will be delivered in Zimbabwe on the same day. The name is derived from the Ndebele word militia, meaning to transport.
We noticed that Zimbabweans living in South Africa had a dire need to send goods, groceries, back to their loved ones in Zimbabwe. What we realized, there was a dire need for the most basic goods. So all of these goods are imported into Zimbabwe and made available in Zimbabwe to a user of the app.
The app has been running for just a few months but has already garnered 20,000 users. Once an order is placed, customers receive an immediate OTA, over-the-air reference, which they can use to pay at 8,000 different retailers across South Africa.
I've been using the app for the past few months. As compared to the buses, the Militia app is quite easy and convenient than buying the groceries. Then you have to carry them to the buses, and then they don't have like a fixed price. They can just judge your luggage by looking on with the eyes.
The technology is not only making it easier to buy and deliver goods, it's also creating employment. 565 people are hired in call centers in Zimbabwe and South Africa, where they receive orders and dispatch the goods. Customers can collect or have their orders delivered to their doorstep on the same day at a flat rate across the country's major cities of Harare, Bulawayo, Masvingo, Gweru and Mutare.
As the world is moving toward more digital space, in Africa we would need to move with those times. And what I'm so happy to see is that we are moving in that direction, and Zimbabweans using our product already, enjoying special features such as scan and pay, which would traditionally only be available to a first world country. I think it's extremely important in terms of convenience, digital money, and removing cash from our traditionally very heavy cash society.
The app is currently only available to Zimbabwean nationals living in South Africa, but Hello Paisa is looking to expand it throughout the SADC region and beyond. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Tunisia, students have held a hackathon where they use technology and artificial intelligence to help resolve environmental issues in Africa. CGTN's Terry Wangari has more.
Technology meets ecology. Tunisian students participated in an eco-friendly challenge called Hack for Earth. Participants were expected to work and help solve an actual environmental challenge with the aim of establishing solutions for the common good. This challenge, which was hosted on Zindi, a data science competition platform in Africa, is meant to help save sea turtles using artificial technology.
This event brings almost 55 participants together. Most of the participants are students and are passionate about science, data and artificial technology. In the 12 hours of the challenge, we are going to propose a solution using artificial technology to help a Kenyan association predict the number of sea turtles they can save every week.
My participation in this challenge today is motivated by a personal goal. Firstly, because this can help me in my education. Everything about data science and machine learning, this trend in technology that is changing the world, is a powerful technology that we can use for humanitarian purposes.
The data will be used by the local ocean conservation as part of their bycatch release program, which saves turtles, tags them, and then releases them back into the ocean.
The challenge today is about using the data provided by a Kenyan association, which shows the numbers and the places of sea turtles that they saved in the past. We are going to use an AI algorithm to predict the numbers of sea turtles that they're going to save each week in the future.
This challenge was difficult because we did not have the target that we needed to predict. Because in supervised learning, we always have a target to predict. The problem was that we had to come up with a target using the data provided by the association. But also understanding the data was a little bit difficult. But to be honest, the mentors helped us a little.
The event was open to all university students and professionals with a passion for solving environmental problems using technology. The results of the challenge were published on the Zindi platform. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
We're going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... We look at a popular West African game to be part of Africa Games in 2023. A traditional West African game, popular among young girls, is on its way to winning a place as part of the Africa Games in 2023. Enthusiasts hope after that it may have a chance of becoming an Olympic sport. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Joanna Adu and her friends while away the time playing their favorite sport, ampe. The traditional game involves jumping and clapping and requires coordination of the feet. Players earn points depending on whose leg meets the opposite leg of the opponent first.
We enjoy playing ampe. We play whenever we come back from school.
Traditionally played by schoolgirls, Ghanaians say the sport originated in their country and was first played by older women in their spare time.
I remember playing ampe as a child and I really enjoyed it. Ampe will continue to be passed on from one generation to another.
The game requires no equipment and is still popular despite the introduction of electronic games.
For these girls, ampe is pure entertainment, but it can also be a form of exercise.
Ampe is now played across West Africa, from Nigeria to Sierra Leone. It's been adopted by the 2023 Africa Games competition to be held in Ghana. But first, the participating countries need to agree on a common set of rules.
For now, we have the rules and regulations. We have ours, Benin have theirs, and then they all have ours. But after we finish going around, before it's going to be accepted, we have to get 8 countries coming up to accept the rules and regulations.
Once the rules and regulations for the traditional sport are adopted by the 8 participating African countries, it will clear the way for girls like Joanna Adu to compete in international games. They will not only play ampe to entertain themselves, but also to win laurels for their country. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
To South Africa now, where a new ring has been created in order to pay homage to one of the country's most iconic natural wonders. The Table Mountain Ring is a collection of uniquely shaped bands with a design that drew inspiration from the silhouette of this majestic natural wonder in Cape Town. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
A mountain that is revered around the world as one of the great 7 natural wonders. And now a ring which is meant to pay tribute to its iconic status. The Table Mountain Ring is more than just a piece of fine jewelry. It's actually meant to instill a sense of pride and to be part of a collective of wearers who were lucky enough to experience its magnificent beauty.
The impact and the majestic presence that is got over Cape Town, and looking over the skyline, I thought it would be quite a beautiful concept to design a ring that people can take a part of Cape Town with them to the countries, and also have something that people in Cape Town will be proud to wear. And whenever somebody wears the Cape Town ring, they become a brand ambassador for Cape Town and promoting the beauty of Cape Town and encourage more people to visit Cape Town.
The ring is part of a collection of bands crafted by luxury jewelry design house Shamansky, who collaborated along with the Table Mountain Cableway Company for the project. With the silver ring starting at around $60, it's priced to compete especially within the tourism sector, along with other Table Mountain mementos.
The tourism economy and also visitors are very important for maintaining Cape Town as a viable city for the economy, for the well-being, and I think we have that responsibility to share Cape Town with the world.
Each ring is also handcrafted in their Cape Town design studio, which makes it a proudly South African product.
When you look at the full pave band, you're looking at 27 diamonds. And the reason why it was chosen 27 diamonds, it is because it's the area code for South Africa.
Of course, diamonds and gold are also other well-known South African commodities, and are also found in the Table Mountain design range, which will suit those tourists who want to make an even bolder statement. The Table Mountain Ring collection will be available not only in stores, but also on the top of Table Mountain, where Cableway staff hope will help play a role in sharing the message of its beauty with even more people around the world. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including